Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Excited to
I'm
be here.
I'm excited to have you and so happy to see you. It's well, it hasn't been that long because you and I were just at the Baltimore Museum of Industry for an event, the Reimagining Industry. Is that what they call it? Reimagining Industry?
Redefining industry.
Redefining Industry, where we
Yeah,
were both honored, which was a fantastic event. I
it
loved your
was.
I loved your story. Maybe I'll get you to recount a little bit of that, through our conversation today.
Would
But
love it. It was well received, and I was really just impressed with everyone that we were honored with, and it was such a well attended event. It just, made me really just so proud and excited to be building a company in Baltimore.
yeah,
It really kind of emphasized how wonderful the ecosystem that we are in really is.
yeah. It really is fantastic. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about you and what you're doing. Give talk a little bit about your background because as I was getting ready for this discussion this morning, I was thinking, there are certain types of people that they get to the pinnacle and they just keep going. And that's how I feel. That's what I think about you. But talk about your background.
Sure.
You're an emergency room doctor, the whole thing. I would love to just sort of give everyone a little bit of background on you, and then we can talk about the company and what you're
Yeah. So
working on.
I am an emergency medicine physician by training. And often when I'm asked this question, I actually go all the way back to like kind of my upbringing, because when I reflect upon it, it shows me that I was basically this person that was always excited and willing to go off the beaten path. So, born and raised in Denver, Colorado, I'm the eldest of four girls. And, was definitely from a very early age, academically inclined, did well in school.
Yeah,
I went to Duke for undergrad, and that was actually the first place where I started doing things like not necessarily according to plan. So I went in initially wanting to do biomedical engineering and quickly discovered that I wasn't going to take fluid dynamics and physics for electives. So
yeah,
I pivoted and did program two, is what they call it there, where I designed my own major in medical ethics and religion. And so
right.
I was taking like philosophy and ethics courses, and then also still maintained all of the credentials needed to apply to medical school. And that's what actually set me up to then go on and go to Case Western for medical school and did a dual degree in medicine and bioethics. So I got a master's in bioethics while I was in medical school, which I really think was a foundational experience for me because it always set me up to look at human beings as an entire entity and not just a disease
Hmm.
process, because I was kind of using my right brain a lot, right? While you go through what is probably considered a mostly left brain regimen when you're training to be a physician. And then, loved emergency medicine. A lot of people ask me why I want to go into that. I really feel like being an ER doc means that you can respond to any emergency, answer a little bit about anything, and do what most people expect you to do if you tell them what they're a doctor, which is like answer a question and offer some
Yeah,
advice. And I liked that I would walk into every shift and really not know what to expect, and that we took care of all walks of life. That was really important to me in the service aspect of it. And so went to residency at GW. I particularly wanted to be at that institution because I had done a research fellowship before I went to medical school at NIH, where I worked in the National Human Genome Research Institute and really understood that, which is very pertinent now, that like politics and science are intertwined and that policy drives how I'm going to be able to practice medicine and what we do in innovation in medicine. So GW was a place where they had a lot of faculty that were tied into health policy, which was a big interest of mine, especially health disparities, end of life care. And that, of course, brought full circle my interest in bioethics. So I was really kind of just going down this academic emergency medicine path after I went to residency, joined faculty with the University of Maryland in 2015. But in my last year of residency is really where I was like noticing the number of people showing up to the ER for nosebleeds. And I just couldn't believe that, we see 500,000 ER visits a year in the US
hmm
for this simple problem. I'm like, put pressure on your nose. You don't need to go to the ER. But I found that a lot of patients would mismanage their nosebleeds by, doing the wrong thing, putting their head backwards instead of forwards, pinching the wrong part of their nose and not holding constant pressure. And I thought there should be an easy to use solution that would, allow them to manage that at home or in any environment and also make my job easier as an ER ER doc. So the idea for Nasal Clip was born when I was a resident. But it took some time for me to say like, okay, I'm going to go off the track again of this academic emergency medicine path, and I'm really going to start focusing on Nasal Clip and building this business. But I think that that background shows you, whether it was being a non-science major,
Mhm.
doing a dual degree in medicine, I was always kind of willing to take these risks and had a strong belief in myself and being able to accomplish anything I put my mind to.
It's such a great story, and there's so many things I want to dig into there before I want to obviously get the nasal clip, but I'm intrigued by sort of the foundation of this thing. So, medical ethics, bioethics, health policy, end of life care. So there's this sort of this gene inside of you that's sort of always thinking about those ethical things. It's really interesting. I have a friend, Bill Strickland, who runs a thing in Pittsburgh called the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, and he always talks about the genes that we have inside of us, not the real genes, but he says I have a gene that doesn't allow me to look away from suffering. So he's always sort of focused on how to help people, and I wonder where this focus on ethics came
Mhm,
from in your life,
mhm,
and then I also wonder where this courage to not always take the beaten path, where does
mhm,
that come from? Because it's a pretty typical, I think, characteristic of entrepreneurs, but most people don't have it, right?
I agree. Yeah, it's pretty
So
rare.
so talk a little bit about those two things, if you would.
Yeah, so when I really think about this, I did a series during February for Black History Month where I documented a lot of my Black history. And one of the things that I was really honored to be able to share is I have this amazing history on my dad's side of the family. So I'm biracial. My mom's white. Her family's mostly from Ireland, and my
Hmm.
dad's African American. And what is special is I know a lot of our genealogy all the way back to the plantation that we were emancipated from in Whittier's, North Carolina. And
Wow.
so during Black History Month, I detailed how my great 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 grandfather, Peter Phillips, who fought in the Civil War, was emancipated and then left with his 8-year-old son, Luke Sr. And because he fought in the Civil War, they gave him land in Indiana. And he had to travel there to get it. It was kind of in the worst part of Indiana for cultivating. And then also, quietly, Indiana is a very difficult place to be as a Black person. A lot of people don't know the KKK was founded in Indiana. Like, it wasn't a warm and fuzzy place to go at the end of
Yeah.
the Civil War. But the two of them started working and being able to accumulate more land, and then Luke walked 21 miles to the Greencastle A&E church, because that was the only other Black church in the county over, because where they were in Owen County there were no Black churches, and married Sarah. They had 11 kids, 9 survived, and every male in that generation, one generation out of slavery, went to college, and all
Wow.
women graduated from high school. And I have to like put this in context. The high school graduation rate in the 1930s was about 30%, Black or white. The college graduation rate was 6%, Black or white. So Black men going to college at that time was unheard of. And so for all of them to do that, and in particular, my great great uncle Leland was Yale educated, also went to Northwestern Ohio State, traveled all around South America, came back. Unfortunately, was trying to educate in St. Louis when he came back, and we believe was lynched. We actually were just told that he committed suicide and that we needed to pick up his body that was in a motel. And so for me to
Wow.
think about the tenacity of my family, right? And also this obviously very strong foundation of education. A
Hmm.
lot of people look at my, background and they think it's really impressive. And I'm always like, I'm just trying to keep up with my family. Like,
Yeah.
we've been
Wow.
doing this. And I also think about how fearless they had to be to really, have that kind of ambition at that time with the risks that, they encountered. And so I think I draw a lot from that. And in the sense that you talk about being in my genes, I literally think it's probably in my genes. And even on my mom's side of the family, who, came over here during the potato famine, and my great great grandmother on that side lied about her age in order to make it through Ellis Island, because you had to be 16 at the time to come by yourself. And she was by herself. So she said she was 16 when she was 14. We didn't find out about that until she died. died. I just have this strong history of women in particular, but like everyone being able to take risks, go off their beaten path to get what they need done, and believing in themselves. And so it's my, great honor to be able to continue that legacy. But I think that a lot of that drive and uniqueness and the entrepreneurial spirit is something that I saw in my family growing up. And so it came very natural to me when I started having these different interests.
Yeah, well, and the thing you hit on the thing I was going to say as you told that story. It probably is in your genes, right? We carry both, all of this stuff, epigenetics that we don't really understand or talk about as much as we should, right? But we carry all of that experience, all of that trauma, but all of that growth
Mhm.
inside of each one of us, right? So it probably is just sort of, embedded in you, and you're sort of expressing it in a different way. And
Right,
I love the notion that, when you think back and think about the tenacity and the courage that our ancestors had to have in
right,
order to give us the opportunity to sit where we sit now.
right.
We were talking about some mishaps that we've had before we started. And sometimes you look at those things and say, well, it's not that bad.
Really,
Yeah,
truly,
maybe we lost a
truly.
little money. Maybe this happened to us. Maybe that happened to us. But think
Yes,
about, all the things that had to happen for us to be where we are today. It's a
absolutely.
so your story is really, really, fascinating, inspiring for us. In fact, transparently, most people will probably know this, but we've invested in Nasal Clip, and we invest outside of the accelerator, so everyone knows that, sort of what I do, the Acceler Conscious Venture Lab and the Conscious Venture Fund. But it's really, it actually is pretty unique when we invest outside of the accelerator, because our thesis about how we want people to show up and the types of people we want to be in business with. We spend a lot of time training entrepreneurs to think differently about the practice of capitalism, to make sure that they're the type of people we want to be in business with. So there's very, it's I won't say there's very few, but we're very selective about the people we invest in outside. And we saw something clearly in you, right away, and we're happy that we were able to contribute even, a little bit to this journey. So glad to be on it with you.
Yeah,
Let's
thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, so let's talk about the company and where it is and what's going on with Nasal Clip.
Yeah, so it's been an exciting few months. As I mentioned, NasaClip was something I came up with as a resident that provides adjustable hands-free nasal compression with intranasal sponges that can be medicated, both size for adults and pediatrics. So it's basically like the Band-Aid of nosebleeds. And if you're having a nosebleed, you'd be able to kind of clear your nose of clot, insert the sponges, which you can put, medications like vasoconstrictors on if you want to, and
Hmm.
then apply pressure so that your hands free can keep doing what you need to do 10 to 20 minutes, release the device. And one of the exciting things is that we just came out with our new reusable version, which I think is really going to be a hit on our consumer side of the business, because the sponges come off and you can replace the sponges. And we just launched on Amazon, which is very exciting, in the
Yeah.
last few weeks, where we have a reusable kit that people can buy in a 10 pack. And then we've continued to grow both our B2B and B2C side of the business. And, the other thing that's been exciting is initially designed this for, it to be used by me as an ER doc for people who showed up to the ER for nosebleeds. But obviously, there are a lot of channels where this is helpful. You can imagine school nurses deal with this on a daily basis.
Hmm.
Sports medicine professionals, we're talking to trainers in the NBA and WNBA. Also, wrestling is probably the number one
Oh,
sport
wow.
with a lot of nosebleeds, MMA, boxing, all these different sports. And then travel and event medicine has been a really surprising channel for us. Disney picked us up last year, so we're on Disney cruise ships and parks. Now talking to airlines, cruises, resorts, especially places that are prone to nosebleeds. Like, I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. People used to just travel to Denver and get nosebleeds. So lots of excitement in addition to that, D2C. And then the next step for us is to actually expand the technology into an intranasal drug delivery platform. So back in January, we submitted a SBIR fast track grant to NIH to look at NasaClip as a more efficient way to deliver naloxone or Narcan, the opioid
Hmm.
reversal agent. And so I knew as an ER doc that I wanted to have this device be able to get medicine in the nose effectively that was, bleeding. But then once I had the device, I was like, oh, it's actually great at delivering any intranasal med. And in particular, I know when we're dealing with drug overdose patients, maybe fire, police, EMS, or even a bystander is trying to resuscitate or revive that person with Narcan spray. But what
Yeah.
happens with the spray is a lot of times it can dissipate, wash out, not get great absorption. And so they have to redose in order to try to get that person back. And I thought, I think that the sponges that Nasal Clip has, maintaining contact with the nasal mucosa and then putting the system under pressure is a better way to deliver drugs like Narcan, which could be more effective in one dose and obviously save lives. So we're very excited about hopefully getting this grant money in order to modify the device and optimize it for intranasal drug delivery. And that also opens us up to a $43 billion intranasal drug delivery market, which for the company will significantly elevate our, I think, value and fast track us to acquisition, since there are a number of pharmaceutical companies that might be very interested in that technology for the drugs they currently make.
One thing that we do at the lab is that, we have this platform, Founder Track, which helps entrepreneurs understand sort of where they are and how to progress through the process of building a business, right? I don't know, your training is in ethics and medicine. How did you seem to have amassed a lot of knowledge in a relatively short period of time. I mean, you started this in 2015?
Yeah, but it was on the back burner really until 2020. That's when I did the Tedco Builder Fund, and that's really the first time I raised capital and started focusing on it. So you're right, Jeff. It's been really about 5 years that I've been really truly focused on the business.
Yeah, and you've amassed a lot of entrepreneurial wisdom
Mhm.
in that short period of time. How do you think that you've come to that? I mean, I don't know what programs you've been through or what you've done,
Yeah.
so maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But as a full-time also ER doc, right? I know we talked the other day. We're like, yeah, I have to go to work, right?
Yeah, I still practice. So, to answer that question, because it's funny, a lot of sometimes investors are like, "Well, are you going to be able to let go of medicine? And are you
Yeah,
serious about
yeah,
this company?"
yeah.
And so, I am a full-time CEO. I've been full-time since about 2023. I gradually brought down my shifts as a full-time ER and then ramped up the business. And now I do only about. I just went down to doing about 2 to 3 shifts in the ER, which I want to continue, both because I spent a long time training to be a physician and I enjoy that work, but
Absolutely.
also for us, when we're selling into hospital organizations and I'm talking to other ER directors, they
Yep.
give me a lot more credit when I'm an actual practicing emergency physician. So it helps
Sure.
me from the business perspective. But you are right. Like none of my training was in business whatsoever. And so when we first started, I had to learn a lot. I think that I stumbled into some resources that were really helpful early on. So one of the programs we did do early in 2015, my co-founder Ramil Patel and I, we did the GW business plan competition, which is what it was
Okay.
called back then. And they recommended doing the NSF I-Corps. So I did both the local NSF I-Corps, National Science Foundation, and the national one. And they're very focused in that in having a business model canvas and doing customer discovery. So we've done over 160 customer interviews since then. And it really kind of threw me into understanding like, what is business? How do I understand my product market fit? Who are all the players? What's the ecosystem that I'm going to be selling this in? And before I pour my blood, sweat, and tears into this idea that I think is fabulous, I need to validate that somebody's going to pay for this
Yep.
if I bring it to market. And so I got that really great instruction early on. And then when we started raising in 2020, and I did some accelerator programs like the Builder Fund with Tedco, I've
Yep.
also done Springboard's Life Science accelerator program. I've done the Ignite pitch competition. So I've done a number of these accelerators. They give you a lot in addition to potential capital. They give you advisors that are really valuable and they kind of walk you through a curriculum where you have to learn. And I think knowing my background, you can probably insinuate I'm pretty good at like picking up stuff on the fly or kind of, if you give me some information, I'm going to be able to absorb from it. I also was told that by somebody who interviews a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs that emergency physicians in particular tend to be very primed for entrepreneurship because what we do as physicians is analogous to running a startup. So we deal with chaos. which is the
Yep.
ER.
Yeah, yeah.
We tend to be resource poor, so understaffed, not having all the things that we need in order to take care of patients. We have to multitask a lot, like switch between tasks a lot. So you have to both micro and macro manage because you're trying to move things through the department and make sure you're not missing someone who might be dying in your waiting room, but also like kind of having those personal physician patient interactions where you're focused when you're in that room with a patient. Those are all things that are required to run a startup. And we have a very high EQ, right? I can walk
Yeah.
into an emotional intelligence, right? I can walk into a room and kind of read in between the lines, understand what's going on, establish a strong relationship in a short period of time. These are all things that lend very well to running a business. In addition to that, it's stressful, right? I have a very stressful job. And so the stresses, the highs and lows of running a startup, I could probably navigate a little better because I was used
Yeah.
to that. And then the rest of it with, I'm complimented a lot on my public speaking. That's something that, I kind of fell into as well and realized I had a knack for. That is something that I did though as an academic ER doc because I did a lot of lecturing. I did a lot of national media around COVID, and that
Yeah.
really fine-tuned my expertise in being able to articulate myself clearly and concisely. And that lended very well to being able to fundraise. So, in a lot of
Mhm.
respects, I had all this background in medicine that actually contributed significantly, I think, to me being successful as an entrepreneur, in addition to maybe some of those natural talents that I got from, the genes we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've been through, we love the GW folks, the business plan competition, ICOR. Obviously, we're very close with TEDCO, Jay at the Ignite. So, you've had some really top level supporters help you, and you've obviously absorbed it. You mentioned something at the end of that fundraising. And I want to talk about that. I think that people will be really interested to hear something that you and I have talked about before, that we care about. What's it like for a Black woman um, to be, first of all, first time entrepreneur, a Black woman. We all know what the numbers, right? 2 to 3% of venture capital dollars maybe going to Black women founders. At the same time, when
That's
Black
just
women,
women, actually, Jeff. Black
yeah,
women is 0.34.
right. So make sure I get my numbers right. At the same time, when Black women and women are starting more businesses than anybody else.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about that, sort of the elephant in the room. What's that been like for you? And what do and where's it going, do you think?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, what my motivation for Nasal Clip is. And obviously, I'm very excited about introducing what I think is a simple but elegant solution to nosebleed emergencies to the market. But my real driver is that, I think that representation matters. And I think that in many regards, statistically, women and Black founders outperform all white male teams all the time, which
Yep.
I think is interesting because the data also shows that we get the least amount of money. So to me,
Right.
it's not adding up. Like if you know statistically that this is actually a safer investment because we're faster to capital or faster to revenue, faster to profitability, can bring 6x returns, why is the money not there? And I think that the money's not there is because there's a historical bias.
Yep.
Venture capital is very risk adverse. It's a high risk investment. And so people, I think, go with what they know and what they see. And for right now, the majority of venture capitalists are white men. And so that's probably why they invest in mostly white men. And so I want to be an example of a stellar founder that has a big exit. I'm going after that $1 billion unicorn exit because
Yep.
the representation matters. And I also obviously am very verbal and, try to show my journey because it is a struggle. Getting that first million in capital was really challenging. I usually share a statistic to try to illustrate how hard it is for Black women to raise. On
Yep.
average, a white male founder needs to speak to about 7 contacts to get a yes or a turn on investment, whereas a Black female founder might have to speak to 10 times that amount, 70 people to get one yes. So it's very much of an uphill battle, and you have to be someone who can like deal with a lot of no's,
Yeah.
and not get your feathers ruffled and not feel down on yourself. And so that's probably also why the ones that make it are so exemplary, because we had to go through such an arduous path in order to get that capital. But it's also why, I think there needs to be more focus on the brilliance and excellence that comes out of these demographics that have historically had very poor access to capital. The way I see it is we all benefit as a human species when we have our best and brightest and our best innovations available to everyone. And so if we're only siphoning from a particular group because of bias, that's hurting all of us. So whatever I can do to kind of course correct and show the example, show the investors that, I'm not here for charity. I am here to make a turn on your investment. I plan to do very
Right.
well. And also that like we can be, really excellent founders coming from these atypical backgrounds. I want to be able to do that.
I should ask that question closer to the end because that's sort of a mic drop. It really is, Elizabeth. Look, I think that we get into this whole debate now about DEI, right?
Mhm.
And there was an article written, I think it was a Wall Street Journal, a New York Times, or somewhere about this tech CEO said, we're going away from DEI. We're going to only talk about merit, excellence,
Right.
but they don't really mean it, right? And this is what I think that I want to double click on this for a second, and maybe get on my soapbox because what you said is so important that the numbers actually don't matter that much to the people who don't care. And they will tell you this is all about performance. It's all about performance. I don't care where you come from. I don't care where you look from. It's all about performance. Until you actually look at the performance and say, if it's all about performance, then you should be investing more in Black women because
Right.
the numbers don't lie. And
Right.
I know there's a lot of people who will listen to this, and I'm going to tell you, go online, get the Google machine, open up Perplexity, do a little research. You'll find out that what Elizabeth and I are talking about is actually those are the facts. This has happened. This has been going on when I was on Wall Street. Um, and you heard this last week. The first job I had on Wall Street was a bike messenger. It was the only
Right.
job I had on Wall Street until I started a hedge fund. And my partner and I, we didn't raise a lot of money. We were in $600-700 million, but we would go to these big meetings, and everyone's like, Wall Street, who's the smartest guy in the room? Well, don't want the most money. So we spent a little bit of time with those guys and said, well, that's bullshit because we met some really, really dumb people who were really rich. And
Yep.
then we go to other meetings and say, okay, performance is all that matters. We've been outperforming the S&P for the last 6 years. And they'd say, well, tell us about your strategy. And we tell them, they were like, well, you're probably making sector bets. We're like, wait a minute. You just said it was all about the numbers, right? And the
Mhm.
numbers don't lie. And we had someone say, well, if you guys were with BlackRock, this would be easy decision. We're like, wait a minute. We thought it was just about performance. It's never just about performance. It's about a worldview, right? Just as
Right.
you said. So it's a really, really important point that I wish people would spend more time thinking about because
Right.
we always say here at Conscious Venture Lab and CVP, Conscious Venture Partners, will invest in anybody, no matter where they come from or no matter what they look like. The difference between that and what a lot of other people are saying is that we actually do the work. We're going into communities where we're actively trying to find something you alluded to, that blue ocean of founders that everyone else is ignoring for all the wrong reasons, for their own bias. So I
Mhm.
think this is a really important point. I'm glad you made it. Um,
Absolutely, Jeff. And just to add to that, I do get really passionate about this whole like fallout with DEI because people forget historically why we have DEI. It's like they're assuming that DEI is giving pathway for people who are less qualified, which
right,
is the opposite of what it is. It is pathway for people who are overqualified but don't have access because of bias.
right,
Like, I come with what I consider to be a pretty strong pedigree, right? I'm Duke undergrad, Case Western Med School, dual degree, board certified emergency physician, had a very strong business plan, all the stuff, and it still will not convert to investments.
right,
And the only way you can really, I think, account for that is some degree of bias. Now, I do think a lot of times it's unconscious. Nobody wants to assume that they're biased, but it is there. I actually do a keynote speech called Weed, Wine, and Leadership. And I use the example of starting with a very provocative question, which is, where does the best marijuana come from? And, people are like, oh my gosh, like, why is this ER doc and
right,
CEO founder talking about marijuana? And I'm like, okay, let me ask you a different question. Where does the best wine come from?
Yeah.
Why is that question about wine so much more comfortable than the question about marijuana? Because I will tell you, as an ER doc, I spent almost no time in my medical school curriculum learning about THC or marijuana. But I had, weeks of curriculum talking about alcoholism and the negative effects and disease related to alcohol.
Right.
But there is a perceived bias that marijuana is worse, maybe black, maybe poor, maybe all these things that people
Yeah.
assume are worse, even though, when you actually dig into it, it's not. So there's an unconscious bias that there's something uncomfortable about marijuana. And I ask the question and actually answer it in the sense that both the best weed and the best wine comes from environments where the plant has to struggle a little bit to survive. So
Hmm.
for wine, it might be that they're dealing with rocky soil or unpredictable weather patterns, which make really potent grapes and kind of interesting flavors. Same with marijuana, like it's maybe a unique space where the plant is kind of doing things to survive in a non-optimal environment. And I then use that analogy to say, well, if I were to ask the question now about where our best leaders, our best entrepreneurs, right, our best you know folks that should be in positions of leadership come from,
Yep.
it is because of that struggle that they tend to do better. And even if you look at, in this country, the majority of our leaders, even if they are white male, they probably have somewhere in their story some sense of struggle. But we are not going to see diversity in who leads and who is represented until we acknowledge this unconscious bias. And when it comes to DEI, it is not at all and never was about letting people in who are not qualified. It's about giving access to people who are actually more than qualified, probably do excellent jobs, but can't get there because there are these kind of invisible ceilings of bias that are preventing them to get into the positions where they can flourish. And we have to acknowledge that as a society. And it is right now, I think, the ultimate time to show why that's important. And so that is definitely an important part of my journey and my story.
You know what? I'm not gonna jump on top. I'm gonna leave that right there because it's so perfectly said, Liz. I want to thank you for that. Let's end with a couple of quick things. What can the community do to be supportive of you?
Thanks for asking, Jeff. So, right now, number one is please spread the word about Nasal Clip. As I mentioned, we just launched on Amazon. So it's super important in our first 3 months to have great reviews, to have, great sales. So if you or anyone needs a solution for nosebleeds, please check us out on nasalclip.com or go to Amazon and buy our reusable kit, other stuff. If you have contacts in hospitals, schools, sports, travel industry that you think would be interested in Nasal Clip, please reach out to me. I am widely available on LinkedIn, Elizabeth Claiborne with a Y, or all social media channels at Dr. Eliz PC. And then outside of that, we are still fundraising. So I always welcome those introductions. That's always something that we're doing in the background for the
Yep.
many reasons we talked about. But if you like what you heard here and you're interested in my story, please follow, support me, and just really spread the word. That's the most helpful thing.
Right. We'll have all of the links to your social media, your website, your Amazon page, everything. We'll put all those links in the show notes so people can just go there and find them if they're listening to this and so inclined to do so. Last thing for you, and this is something we're building a database of all of our guests' favorite songs.
Oh,
So you can give me, I like to have five, but you can give me three to
five?
five. I like to have five, but you give me three to five. It can be your favorite, if you're stranded on a desert island, back in the
Okay.
day, desert island discs, you're stranded on a desert island, five, three to five songs or albums that you must have with you.
Okay. I recently started doing a playlist that my executive coach actually made me do, that's like supposed to ground me. And so on here,
Okay.
I love reggae and Afro beats. So I would say Sun is Shining by Bob Marley is one of
Yeah.
my favorites. I also like old school music, What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong.
Love it.
Um, I also like grew up for some reason loving James Brown. I don't know why.
Who
Like,
doesn't love, I love James Brown. Who doesn't love James
so
Brown?
I would say any James Brown, like, just to get moving, get
Yeah.
grooving. I
I,
actually met him when I was in college studying abroad in Australia. He did a concert and I got to meet him before he passed, which was like super special. Absolutely love that.
Love me some James
Um,
Brown.
yes. And then I'm trying to look at, so what did I give you? Three?
You gave me Sun is Shining, Bob Marley, Wonderful World, Louis Armstrong, any James Brown. I might, put some stuff in there. Good Foot, maybe. So you
Okay, and
gave
then
me three.
I gotta have my hustle. So a lot of people ask me for like intro songs when I'm walking up as an
Yeah, yeah,
entrepreneur,
walk
and I
us on.
always do Rick Ross hustlin'.
Okay.
It just like it came out when I was in med school, and we used to always feel like we're hustling. Although my mantra for 2025 is also to not feel like I have to work so hard all the time to make things happen for me. But that song always gets me up and gets me going, which is like really helpful. And
You
then I
got one
think
more
that
here.
yeah, and then I think Afro beats wide, maybe Calm Down, which I'm totally forgetting the artist's name.
We'll find it.
Like I like to, something where I can just, it's helpful for me to have music that allows me to pause and, come back to myself and remember that life is something to be enjoyed, even though we're working hard. And so, Rima, that's what it is. Calm down.
Rima, Calm Down by Rima. Liz, it's been really fun. Sorry we had a little hiccup in the beginning getting started, but it was worth the wait. It's been really, really enjoyable to spend time with you last week at BMI, today here, get to know you a little bit better, and wishing you all the best. And we're here to help. So keep in touch.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot. It's good to see you. See you soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye-bye.